Well, you wanna pick up where we left off, Ellen?
Sure.
The, what is it, 10.4?
Draft 10.4, yes.
I don't recall Mr. Burke's criterion 11 before, but I like it.
I remember it, yeah. He certainly finds it handy.
Yeah.
He uses it a lot.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to stick. What page did we leave on?
Page 15, I believe.
15?
I believe so. Thanks.
Ellen Czajkowski, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm here on draft 10.4 of your Act 250 committee bill. So we left off yesterday at the bottom of page 14, top of page 15, getting ready to talk about the board. Is that where you want to start? I have one piece of information I would like to update the committee on. Yesterday we briefly had a discussion about primary retail.
Right.
So I pulled the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Plan, and they have definitions for principal and primary retail as well as secondary retail. So primary retail, and remember this comes into play on the discussion of interchange areas and what types of businesses should be discouraged in interchange areas. So primary retail means a business whose primary use is the supply of merchandise or wares to the end consumer. Examples include supermarkets, hardware stores, dry goods stores, pharmacies, and big box stores. Secondary retail means a business whose primary use is not retail sales, but contains a retail component that is clearly secondary to the primary use. Examples include doctor's offices, veterinarian's offices, small engine repair shops, and manufacturers with a showroom. So that is how Two Rivers uses those phrases. I can include those definitions in your bill if you would like to add them for clarity.
Yes.
Would it be your understanding if we just included retail will include primary, secondary, tertiary definitions of retail? Do we need to really be that specific if we're going to be supporting or addressing retail? I'm wrestling with the value of whether and why we would want that specificity if we're just going to be treating all retail the same.
So we're not treating all retail the same under the interchange bill. Principal primary retail should be discouraged is the language used on page 7. And so if you want, it could just say retail. I was attempting to provide a definition to a phrase that was used. So if you want to make a statement about all retail, you don't need to necessarily provide that distinction. But if you're interested in more clearly defining the language that's used under the interchange language on line 5 on page 7, this is an option.
So if I'm coming off an interstate and coming off now on the exit ramp and needed gasoline or wanted a coffee, by discouraging principal retail establishments in this interchange area, that means such a convenience would be conveniently located.
What was the last part of that?
Conveniently located, really close enough so that it's right there for me when I simply want something real quick, either gasoline or coffee, and resume the travels on the interstate.
So, I think that that would fall into what is primary or principal retail, and that the language here says that should be discouraged.
The purpose being
Yeah, sure.
to get people to go further into a village or an area other than right there and go again.
Now, you could potentially, so under these definitions, gas station wasn't listed as an example as either of those, so you could change the definition to to finesse it so that providing gasoline with having a secondary shop, that could be considered something besides primary retail. But I think what Representative Morgan was just saying was part of the intent was retail should be part of the village center or the compact settlement, as opposed to taking place in the interchange area.
What impact would that have on those already there? That already have that? None?
These are still sort of the criteria that regional planning commissions will look at when evaluating if a municipality has sufficient bylaws.
Paul,
Yes.
just want to make a statement that retail should be anywhere in the state where families, Vermonters should be able to make a buck. I mean, this is nuts, you know?
Carol?
Is principal, I missed this somehow, but when you say principal retail and then you said the definition for primary and secondary, are you saying principal is the same as primary?
Yes. It's principal or primary.
Somewhere else in the statute it says principal is primary?
Yeah. So I apologize if that was unclear. Principal retail.
Anyone else got a? Yes. Chip?
I'm thinking that the question was raised by my seatmate here that do we really want to even go into defining these, and Counsel has pointed out we're using it in legislation and we need to define it or change how we've got it written so that we don't need a definition. That I think that I think we need to just change that line so that we don't need the definition and try and not go into writing or adopting a definition of retail, principal, primary, and secondary, and all of that, and you know, Lee brings up, I think, sort of obliquely the point that there is a distinction between getting off at exit blah 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 and getting gas or I guess it was Paul getting gas and for the car and gas for yourself and versus driving downtown somewhere to have to acquire that and your Slim Jim or your donut or whatever it is, your caffeine. So I think if we just change the language, which I think you suggested that we could do, and then not have to have a definition of it. Is that would that work?
So would you just want to strike the word principal so that it would read retail should be discouraged or prohibited?
I'd like to strike the whole line.
Okay, that's
That's what I'd like
an
to do.
option too.
Yeah, so Tom and I are,
Okay.
I think Tom and I are on the same case here. And then let the municipalities figure out, you know, if they're
Yes,
doing that.
Yeah,
I agree.
just to clarify, a municipality could zone whatever they wanted to in that area, right?
Right,
So, sure, let them do it.
right, yeah.
I have one
Yes,
comment.
yes.
It seems as though in this discussion, we're talking about interstate exchanges. I get the feeling we seem to think that these are all just blank spots at the moment and we're going to do something. It seems as though when I drive 9189, I-80, 189, these exchanges are already filled up with everything. I mean, there are gas stations right there, there's stores, there's everything. What are we trying to do here when it appears that it's already done? I mean, any place you can whip off and there you go, you got everything you want. What are we gonna do by doing this? What's its purpose? What's its attempt?
Is the committee comfortable with just striking that entire sentence?
Well, I am. I guess I'm one. I backfilled with Tom on that, but I do want to make sure I understand that the municipality, in the case where the municipalities are taking jurisdiction, will take care of that, and where Act 250 is taking jurisdiction. They have an ability through criteria to better understand what retail might do to that area versus would you say that's accurate to the surrounding areas and not creating strip mall or strip development and so on?
Sure. Criterion 9L addresses some of that.
Yeah.
And potentially 9J.
9J is that?
I want to retract
There's
that
a
statement in case I was that
There's
inaccurate.
there's aesthetics also that they could consider under.
I think it's 8L.
Criteria 11, isn't it?
There's there isn't an 8L. It's the
What's the
9
one?
9 is the
8N?
one that's very low.
What's the one on settlement patterns?
9L. Yeah.
That
Yeah. 9J is public utility services. 9L is settlement patterns.
Okay, yeah.
And then 9H is the cost of scattered development.
So they can consider if it falls under Act 250 jurisdiction because municipalities aren't doing it. They have the tools to better understand what a certain type of retail might have on that intersection.
Sure, and so what we're talking about right in this language is the threshold question that a regional planning commission will ask when evaluating a municipality's bylaws.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So we're not even
we're not even there, Jim.
No,
Right,
yeah.
okay,
So
good.
this is whether or not a
Yeah.
municipality has set up bylaws in the area of interchange areas that are covering these specific topics.
Good, yeah. So, yeah, I'm not backing down from my thought.
Carol?
I like it in here. I'd be okay with just retail.
Well, should we have a vote? Carol?
And if this was part of the joint proposal, that was the compromise bill. This is the same language. As you know, broken record on the joint proposal, I support it for that reason.
I
Go
would
ahead,
just like to add to what I said, which is, if Act 250 isn't going to apply, want to make sure that you have something going on locally that takes into consideration what Act 250 is trying to do statewide. And that this sentence would allow that. And
This sentence makes us look like we're anti-business, that's what it makes us look like.
Well, that's one way, I get that, but I'm also thinking you are protecting businesses in the downtown. You are protecting taxpayers from having to pay for extra traffic and so forth that might start going to this area off the interstate rather than going to the downtown. You're protecting the look of Vermont and the historic character of Vermont so that we get more tourists coming here because we don't look like other places, and so it increases our tax revenue. And it's not saying no to all business, it's saying consider being over here.
Matt,
Sorry.
I just wanted to point out, the first sentence in that section, in that 5, Roman numeral 5, ensure that all uses of type, scale, and design that complement rather than compete with existing downtowns. I think that's the major, point to be made there. It's not necessarily the principal retail thing. I feel that that first clause is pretty strong in and of itself.
yes, Leslie.
I think that the importance for me is the aesthetics. When you drive up the interstate, it's nice to look like it's still rural, especially for people coming to visit. They're coming up here to see a nice rural countryside. They're leaving certain places so they can come up and see something that looks nice. And for that reason, the aesthetic thing only, I would like to see that there. But any other, that would be my main focus.
So you're in favor of keeping the line?
I am, yes, but that's just me.
Sure. Any more discussion, or should we take a quick straw vote and see where that falls? Yes.
The only thing I'd like to add is, I agree with Lee on this. I think keeping that language in there, even though I also agree with Matt on his comment, just provides greater clarity to how a plan can best reflect those aesthetic values.
Well, the only thing I want to say is that we are lacking 2 members.
We are.
Suggest
We could
Put it on
put
hold.
it on hold, would you more happy?
I have a question.
Yes, Chris.
So, how does this, what you guys are all talking about, apply to Super 7 or 279 in Bennington County when this does not apply to us? So how does that work for us?
I think it would apply, isn't because from your another rep in your area has often told me that when they built their road, the town of Bennington, the village center there, suffered greatly because they could kind of just go around it and you could stop at the gas station and just go on your merry way and not ever drive through the town itself.
I don't know who told you that.
Jim Carroll did.
Oh, God.
So
Beautiful.
So saying if you're encouraging that, you're going through town instead of just kind of going around and stopping at and then moving on your merry way, if you could help, funnel that through the town, that is more revenue for.
Well, it's not laid out that way. So Super
I'm just saying
7,
that's what this is trying to get at. Is that?
but it doesn't really apply to us if you look at the way it's set up.
Sure. Okay.
That's all. But I'm just saying about Super 7. It's not an interstate. It's just a
Right.
road that, what we have like in Manchester. You can get off. It's got a nice interchange. And that's what I'm saying. It doesn't. How does that apply? Because businesses could be there. There's plenty of space for it.
Right, so the section that we're in right now is establishing a new jurisdictional threshold for areas around interstate interchanges.
Right.
The RPC will then go through a process to determine if a municipality has these sufficient bylaws to either, if they don't have the sufficient bylaws, the interchange area will be under Act 250 jurisdiction. If they do have sufficient bylaws per these criteria, then they do not, the interchange will not be under Act 250 jurisdiction. It'll be under municipality jurisdiction.
Well, I think we have a consensus, so let's move forward, let's make it, decide what we want to do and go on. Yeah,
I thought we were gonna hold it till our other two members.
well, it's, how much more are we gonna hold? We got question marks on,
No, I mean,
throughout this bill.
vote later, but just,
I'm gonna call a vote, Ms. Rockwood. And so, those who are in favor of leaving the line of principal retail, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Those willing to take it out? I believe we're gonna take it out.
Okay.
All right, let's move on.
That was an environmentally unsound move. Now we're forcing people to drive more and wasting more gasoline.
this is something the administration said,
They'll be driving-
okay.
they'll be driving
Governor
electric
said,
soon.
okay.
Maybe. I like to pull off and get some gas and get going.
So, did you want me to talk about the specific language around the board, or do you want to talk about the high-level structure of the board? Do you want to go to a different section? What would you like to do next?
Well, I think the chair should be here for this discussion since it's the most substantial change being offered. So, do you have a recommendation perhaps of where we could, something a little less controversial that we could start with?
Sure.
Principal retail or something like that.
Have to get rid of retail.
She finished it, I'll give us credit for that.
Tell us about Steve.
Yeah. The other option would,
Do you want to talk about maps?
let's just adjourn early today, this morning. And we'll get back to this after the floor.
What a great
Chair
chair.
over here.